And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Remember to hit that subscribe button. It really does help us out. Appreciate every single one of you who've joined our community in the past couple of days. Let's see if we can keep that momentum going. Now, we've already gone over the AL East, AL Central, AL West, and we just did the NL East. Now let's begin with the NL Central. Now, of course, this is going to begin with the Milwaukee Brewers. The Milwaukee Brewers are probably the best team in this division, according to everybody else on paper, but you're going to have to wait till the end of the video to find out where I have them. But for me, let's start with the lineup, anyway, of the Milwaukee Brewers. First and foremost, everything begins with Christian Yelich. Christian Yelich just has not been himself for the past couple of years, whether you believe it's injury or just regression in talent. If he gets to that superstar level status again, or even just league average status, this team is going to be much better for it. The addition of Willy Adames really has accelerated this lineup. They're kind of a build from within team, or take other older prospects that have failed in other systems and try to get a little bit more out of them with the Brewers. They're based a lot on their bullpen of Josh Hader and Devin Williams, who broke his hand inexplicably, like Amari Stoudemire did in the playoffs for the New York Knicks when he punched the fire extinguisher. Devin Williams broke his hand punching a wall at the end of the regular season, and the Brewers didn't have him in the postseason. Just a completely boneheaded decision. I mean, I get it. It's frustration. You can't really, control yourself sometimes, but you got to do better than that. Be a little smarter than punching cinder blocks. I mean, come on now. They didn't have him in the postseason. They lost, didn't get to the World Series, obviously. Braves did win the World Series, so congratulations to them. But as far as this lineup, they made a few additions and subtractions. They got rid of Jackie Bradley Jr. In a trade for Hunter Renfroe. In my opinion, a vast upgrade for the Brewers. Jackie Bradley Jr. was not doing much. The defensive liability, the defense that he once brought wasn't as good last year. The offense just fell off a cliff the last couple of years. There's just no offensive force behind his bat. Hunter Renfroe at least gives you a little bit of pop. He will have a lot of swing and miss in his game, but that's why the Brewers plan for that in their lineup. They got Colton Wong taking over that second spot. Hira, of course, the prospect is still there. We'll see if they get a little bit more out of him, Christian Hira, but he has not had a good couple of years. They did bring in Andrew McCutchen, former MVP level player anyway. If they get anywhere near his level of production again, great addition for them. That outfield is going to be dynamic defensively with Yelich, McCutchen, and Kane in the outfield. Third base has been a little bit of a black eye for them the last few years, kind of journeyman that they've tried to plug and play at that position. Mike Moustakas at one point. This year it looks like they're going to go with another journeyman and Jace Peterson. Maybe they end up getting somebody from the minor leagues to come up and take over that position by the middle of the season, or they go out and solidify that with another journeyman type player at the deadline who's having a good year. The biggest reason why everybody believes this team is the best in the division is that starting staff. And it probably is the best starting staff in the division, don't get me wrong. Brandon Woodruff is your number one. Corbin Burns, your number two. Freddie Peralta, your number three. Eric Lauer, Hauser, and Ashby are your 4, 5, and 6. The bullpen, of course, you have Devin Williams and Josh Hader rounding out things in the bullpen. Hader can be a multi-inning reliever. They've said over the past couple of years they're going to try to limit that effectiveness for him, try to keep him to 1 year. That way he's fresher down the stretch and going into the postseason. They haven't been able to do that, though, in the last couple of years. We'll see if they stick to their word this year. Now, Devin Williams will be back from injury at some point this year. We'll see if he has anywhere near effective or anywhere near the effect that he had last year in his rookie season, or have hitters figured out what he's doing to them when they're in the batter's box against him. We'll see if he continues that success. For me, the sophomore slump will be real for him. We'll see if he can grow that mental game of his and stop punching walls and breaking his hand. Rowdy Tellez is now your first baseman. They moved on from Jesus Aguilar a couple of years ago. They've had kind of a plug-and-play kind of approach at that first base position ever since Prince Fielder left and went to the Detroit Tigers and then the Texas Rangers. So they've kind of plugged and played and tried to match different pieces in there. Rowdy Tellez should be a nice piece for them, a little bit more of a masher. On-base guys in Adames, Wong, and McCutchen should do very nicely for them. Kane as well as more of a doubles hitter. Maybe they'll get on enough in order for that pitching staff to really show their effectiveness. Maybe get 6, 7 innings out of their 1, 2, and 3 guys, and then rely on that bullpen to kind of finish out games. They'll probably finish anywhere between 80 and 95 wins. Just kind of depends on how good this team is. If Yelich is back to MVP level, Christian Yelich, this is a fantastic team. We're talking about close to 100 wins. I don't expect that out of Christian Yelich, In fact, I'm a little bit worried about his career at this point. If he doesn't get back to at least a league average performance this year, you have to really consider other options in the outfield if you're a Milwaukee Brewers fan. You can't afford to sit there and have a bad contract on your books because there's no way for you to really build a team around it, or at least try to build or avoid the loss that he has for you. Maybe they can flip him for other bad assets on another team, kind of like the Jackie Bradley Jr., Hunter Renfroe type move. But not every team is going to give away a decent power hitter in exchange for junk. I'm sorry, Boston Red Sox fans. Jackie Bradley Jr. at this point is junk. If you can get some nostalgia out of him, great. If you can get some more defense out of him, great. If you can get a little bit of contact again out of him, great. But Hunter Renfroe at this point in the career is the much better player, and the Brewers are going to reap the benefits of that trade. So let us know in the comment section what you think of the Brewers, their starting staff. For me, this lineup is still lacking. If they can get back to league average production out of Christian Yelich, they should be just fine. Third base will be the issue for them. Will they go out and get a nice piece if they're in playoff contention, which I expect them to be. Next team on the list is going to be the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals are the model of consistency. They're always in contention. They're always going to make the playoffs, it seems like. Every single year, they're either 1, 2, or 3 in the division. They never bottom out. They're never fifth in division. They just never have that bad of a year. Now, they did have some philosophical differences with the manager. Mike Schilt, they decided to move on from him and go with their in-house guy. I'm still a little bit worried about this starting staff. Michaelis is coming off a bad year. Dakota Hudson's in that lineup. Matz is coming off a decent year with the Mets, but again, it wasn't exactly a great piece for them either. The Mets could use his starting ability right now, of course, because they have injuries in that starting staff already. Looking at the 1 and 2 in this rotation, Adam Wainwright is the breadwinner here. Even at his age, he is still the most effective starter they have. Jack Flaherty, when healthy, is even better, but he's not been healthy enough and he's not been effective enough for him to overtake that number 1 role from Adam Wainwright. In the bullpen, Giovanni Gallegos is going to be your closer this year. He had a nice he's had a nice year last year. If he can repeat that performance this year, that bullpen should be just fine. The big addition last year anyway was Nolan Arenado at that third base spot. You get another year out of Yachty as the face of the franchise, but this is now Nolan Arenado's team. He's the best player on the team. Great third base defense anyway. Great hitter. Had a good first year in St. Louis. After another year of being comfortable in St. Louis, I expect him to really take off this year. Tyler O'Neill had a nice year as well last year. He was your left fielder. He's probably your 3-4 with Nolan Arenado. Dylan Carlson is your right fielder. So they have some good outfield and good pop in their lineup. Goldschmidt is, of course, still your first baseman. The one move they did make at that DH position is going to be Albert Pujols. I haven't made a standalone video on it yet anyway, but Albert Pujols is entering probably his final year. He did announce that already. I believe he's trying to chase down that extra 21 home runs that he needs to beat the record anyway, or to make his, I think it's 600 home runs. I can't remember off the top of my head, but anyway, he's trying to hit an extra 21 home runs this year. I believe if he gets close to it this year, say he hits 19, 18, 20, he's coming back for one more year. I expect if he gets enough playing time that he will get to that plateau, but he's probably going to be splitting time with a guy like Nolan Gorman anyway. Paul DeYoung is still your shortstop there. Harrison Bader's in center field. He's had a couple of up and down years. If he can find some consistency in center field, this lineup could be much better than it already looks on paper. Tommy Edman is your second baseman, of course. So that's kind of your starting lineup. That rotation, again, is my issue for the St. Louis Cardinals. They always rely on young depth for them to be able to fill in spots whenever they don't have or whenever they have poor performance there. They've been able to mitigate poor seasons from Carlos Martinez in the past, those kinds of things. Miles Michaelis last year was terrible, had a little bit of injury issues as well. If he can regain the dominance that he had in his first year back from overseas, this is a much better rotation. However, I'm not expecting it. They're probably going to need to fill in at the back end of the rotation, i.e. a John Lester type acquisition or a J.A. Happ, that kind of thing. But as it stands right now, looking for more of the same out of the St. Louis Cardinals. They don't really get too high and they don't get really too low as far as their year-to-year changes in win tone. This year, though, I expect Nolan Arenado to kind of take that next step forward for this team and take over that mantle from Yadi Molina, who probably is in the final year or two of his deal as well. So overall, a very good team. But again, you're not expecting too many highs, too many lows. They're going to be in contention all year round. Stick around to the end of the video to find out where I have them ranked. Now, the next team on the list, of course, is going to be the Chicago Cubs. The Chicago Cubs have been a fascinating team for the past 6-7 years, ever since they decided to gut their entire roster, go really young, go the Chris Bryant, Jason Hayward, Nico Horner is now on the team anyway. Ian Haps, Wilson Contreras, Javi Baez, Anthony Rizzo route, Kyle Schwarber. All these guys, they decided to ship off a bunch of them to get a little bit younger. They shipped. They did get Nick Madrigal anyway at the deadline last year from the crosstown rival, the Chicago White Sox. He should be their everyday second baseman. If they can get him to be the player that he was expected to be coming out of college, I think he was the number 3 or number 4 pick out of the draft a few years back. He just hasn't found that consistency at the plate. He's had some issues with health. He is small, so that kind of is more of the injury issue than anything else. But as far as Nick Madrigal, if he can take off and really become that on-base guy, that doubles hitter, maybe a little bit of pop in that bat as well, this team could really take that next step. The big addition they did make this offseason was Seiya Suzuki. They signed him to, I believe, a 6-year deal, $80 million. And then, of course, the posting fee ended up bringing the total value of the deal to $99 million. That's a lot of investment for a Chicago Cubs team that claimed to be paring down payroll because they were worried about taxes and bills and that kind of thing. One other thing on a Cubs note anyway, just from a management side and money side, the ownership group anyway is interested in buying the Chelsea team from the English Premier League in soccer. If you're worried about money, why are you throwing money around in the English Premier League where money is thrown around like candy? I just don't understand the logic from it. From a Cubs fan's point of view, you're also looking at the addition of a Marcus Stroman from a starting staff, 3 years. I believe it was $71 million that he got from the Cubs. They are throwing around a little bit of money, and they are reinvesting in the team, which is great if you're a Cubs fan. But I'm wondering why you didn't do that with your homegrown players, Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, Anthony Rizzo. Anthony Rizzo signed just a few-year deal. I think it was 30 or 45 million with the Yankees. I can't remember off the top of my head. But that it wasn't a lot, and you're saying that you're willing to spend money on these other pieces who have no history, no tie to the Cubs, and you're not willing to invest in your own homegrown talent. It's just a confusing move. Not saying that I don't disagree or that I disagree or agree with the move, but it's just a different way of going about it. Do I agree that the pieces that they brought in are very productive and should be good for them? Absolutely. I'm totally sold on Seiya Suzuki. The imports that we brought in from overseas over the last couple of years just haven't worked out. Satsugo is probably the most notable one going to the Tampa Bay Rays. If you don't know his name, don't worry about it. It's not worth remembering at this point. He's on the Pittsburgh Pirates right now. That tells you all you need to know about how good that worked out for the Tampa Bay Rays. However, this is probably going to be an MVP level player. At least he was in Japan. If he gets anywhere near that level of production in the States, which I expect he probably will, we're talking about a fantastic cornerstone benchmark player for the Chicago Cubs. However, there's not much in the lineup to really protect him. I was just looking at a projected lineup for them. They have Patrick Wisdom hitting in front of him at that third base position. Patrick Wisdom was a journeyman third baseman with the Texas Rangers, got cut and traded by the St. Louis Cardinals. He's since moved on to the Chicago Cubs, found a little bit of success at the end of last year there, but they have him hitting in front of him. There's just not a lot of lineup protection there, so I do worry about where they're going to deploy him at. They did bring in Clint Frazier. They, of course, still have Jason Hayward. Every year I say I expect a little bit better out of Jason Hayward, and every year I'm kind of disappointed, so I'm not going to say it this year. At this point, it's just a bad contract, and they're just trying to get at least a little bit of value out of it. Nico Horner was a former top prospect. They've counted on him a lot the last year, probably a little bit more than they should have. Ian Happ is probably the same thing. They just pushed them a little too hard, a little too fast, and their prospect status is now gone, and their value is somewhat diminished. I expect with them being able to keep guys like Wilson Contreras around, Kyle Hendricks, takes a little bit of that pressure off this year now that they've been around the big leagues enough to where now they maybe feel a little bit more comfortable and they regain that value. They have a little bit more of a renaissance year for both of them. I expect both of them to do much better. However, Wilson Contreras was a sought-after man this offseason at the catcher position. With the lockout, it just wasn't feasible for the Cubs to be able to move him yet. At the deadline, if they're out of contention, which they may be, they could look to move him at the deadline to another team, maybe get a little bit younger as well. The moves that they made to get younger, all those trades that they made for Bryant and Baez and all those other pieces, they did get a lot of youth back in there. So we'll see what kind of success they have with those young pieces over the next few years. They did bring in David Robertson to be their closer after trading Craig Kimbrell last year to the Chicago White Sox in that deal. I believe it was Madrigal that went the other way in that deal. As far as the rotation, Marcus Stroman was the big addition this year, 3 years, $71 million. Great contract for Stroman. Kind of surprised he only went with a 3-year deal. Maybe he was going after the AAV after having to sit out a year with because he wanted to sit out due to COVID and everything. He had a great dominant year. He's still very young, even after missing a whole year just because of the COVID thing. He was not injured. Don't get me wrong. But he chose to sit out that season in 2020. Great bounce back year last year because he hadn't pitched the year before. But he's been very effective ever since he's came into the big leagues. I expect more of the same from when he goes to Chicago. The National League now has the designated hitter. So I expect because he won't have to hit as much, he'll be able to focus on that pitching side a little bit more. And I expect that concentration level and the intensity that he brings on the mound to translate to bigger and better things for him and the Cubs. They still have Kyle Hendricks there to kind of lead that rotation. Wade Miley, Alec Mills, and Drew Smiley kind of round out that rotation. If you're a Cubs fan, this year is about growth for Madrigal, Horner, and Happ. If they can get good, productive years out of those three pieces, this year will have been a success no matter what their record turns out to be. Now, of course, you don't want to see other players get injured, and you want to see Suzuki translate to the MLB game. But this is his first year in the big leagues, and you got to give him some time to get his feet wet. Next year should really be the kind of benchmark year for him. But if you get great production out of him this year, hey, more the merrier. The one position that seems a little bit cloudy for me, at least, is first base. Frank Swindell is currently penciled in at that first base position. This is a year, like I said, for growth. If they get some production out of him, great. But for me, they could do a lot better. I expect them to go after some deadline moves, maybe finally offload the money of a guy like Jason Hayward, finally move Wilson Contreras, and maybe they bring in a top prospect at that first base position. But for right now, that's one of the biggest holes in their lineup. Third base as well. The corners they don't have a lot of talent at those positions at the major league level. We'll see if the prospect pool is a little bit better going forward. All righty. The Pittsburgh Pirates are the next team in this division. The Pirates, they've finished in the cellar pretty much every year the last several years now. Their run to the playoffs with the days of Garrett Cole being on the team are over. Those happy days are gone. There's been trade talk about Brian Reynolds pretty much ever since he kind of took off with the Pirates. They traded away Stallings, their catcher. They still have Roberto Perez to take over that catcher role. And they got a lot of older prospects now in the lineup. Kevin Newman at short, Anthony Alford in left, Ben Gamble's kind of journeyman in right, Daniel Vogelbach can be your DH. Satsugo's there at first base, and we already touched on how great he was with the Tampa Bay Rays. Not. But everything about this team is about Brian Reynolds and Ke'Bryan Hayes. Ke'Bryan Hayes probably is going to hang around with the Pirates for a couple more years. I don't expect them to move him. But Brian Reynolds could be had. Center fielders are in demand right now. Switch hitting as well. Very valuable piece. Teams that could be interested, we've already heard the Pittsburgh Pirates the San Diego Padres have touched base on him after Jose Ramirez signed that extension today with the Cleveland Guardians. They could circle back to Brian Reynolds and try to improve their team that way. They, of course, still have to offload Eric Hosmer or Will Myers to kind of save money, and maybe that's what they end up doing to try to improve their team overall, going after a guy like Brian Reynolds. From a starting staff, they are going after bounce back years for Jose Quintana to kind of take over that number one role. Mitch Keller, the prospect, is still looking to get his feet underneath him in the major leagues. Will Crowe, Zach Thompson, and JT Brubaker are going to be your starters. Nothing really moves the needle there for me. Closer is going to be David Bednar this year for the Pirates. Maybe they flip around a couple of bullpen pieces around the deadline, get even younger. This is a very young team, and that's basically how they've had to run things ever since they've been there. They get a couple of good years out of some really nice pieces, and then they end up having to move them, or they just leave in free agency because they can't afford to sign them in free agency. Maybe they have a couple of good young prospects coming in the pipeline that'll give them that ability. They should have a high draft pick this year as well. So we'll see if they get some talent coming in the next few years. But as of right now, this team is definitely going to still be in the cellar of this division. There's not much to look forward to outside of Brian Reynolds. And once you trade him, the only thing left for you really to be talking about is a rebuilding or a renaissance year for Jose Quintana that you then turn around and flip at the deadline. And then the maturation of Brian Hayes. Does he continue to take that next step forward, become a star for the Pittsburgh Pirates? Quite possibly, but as of right now, not yet. The last team in the division is going to be the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds have already jettisoned off a number of different players. I expect them to continue that trend. Looks like they're trying to shed as much payroll as they possibly can, and you can't really blame them. The contracts that they have doled out just haven't worked out for them. They went to Japan for Akiyama, I believe was the name. Didn't work out. They got another $9 million left on his deal. Moustakas has got 2 years left and $38 million. That hasn't worked out. Eugenio Suarez deal didn't work out years ago. They had the Homer Bailey deal. That didn't work out, and they had to end up flipping him to the Los Angeles Dodgers, which cost them top prospect Josiah Gray. It looks like they've been willing to attach pieces again to get rid of money. They got rid of Jesse Winker, their left fielder, all-star level player, probably one of the top 2 or 3 left fielders in the game. But they had to get rid of him in order to move the money of Suarez and get some pieces of value back. The 2 players left on their starting staff that they still have to move, Luis Castillo and Tyler Mahle. I expect both of those to probably be at least in very deep discussions around the deadline. Mahle, I expect to be gone at the deadline. If Mike Minor has a renaissance year this year, he's another starter for them. I expect them to move him. Basically anything, if it's not nailed down to the floor, they're going to move it. Moustakas moves back over to his natural position of third base after Suarez gets moved to the Mariners. Maybe he has a little bit of a bounce back, and maybe a team like the Rangers comes calling and says, hey, we'll take the money on for X, Y, and Z. That could be something that would interest the Reds. But if you're a Reds fan, this is about Joey Votto finding a little bit more power in his bat last year. Kind of the last few swan song years for Joey Votto. He's been one of the top first basemen in the game for the past 5 or 6 years. And it just seems like now is the time that you just really celebrate him and his career and everything he's meant to the city of Cincinnati. And maybe you move him at the deadline, get something for him. But for me, he's a franchise icon, and I wouldn't move him. He's the one piece that I would say is nailed down, is not going to go anywhere. Tyler Stevenson takes over at the catcher position full-time now that they move Barnhart to the Tigers. If they get some great production out of him this year, this team will take a nice step forward in their rebuilding process. Tyler Naquin's going to be in your outfield. Of course, they could still look at other outfield additions. Michael Conforto is still out there on the market, but as we've mentioned, they're looking to offload payroll, not add to it, and it would cost a pick as well in the draft. The Reds right now are looking to get younger, so I don't see that happening at all. But this team is in rebuild. They got Colin Moran as well now to take over that DH spot. Maybe they flip him and Moustakas around from third base and DH and see which one does clamps down on that defensive position a little bit better and leave the other one at DH. Jonathan India is your second baseman this year. If you're a Reds fan, there's not much to look forward to. Kyle Farmer, your shortstop, but this year is going to be about getting younger, selling off important pieces. Maybe you hang on to Luis Castillo until the offseason. Get one more really nice year out of him. He had a down year by his standards last year, but he was still very effective. If a team comes in with a great offer, the Reds will say yes. It's going to happen. Sorry, Reds fans. There's not much to look forward to this year other than Joey Votto and getting younger. So, with all that said, where do I have these teams ranked? Well, in the cellar, first and foremost, I have the Pittsburgh Pirates. There's just not much going for them. Bounce back year by Jose Quintana is probably going to be your best thing as a starter. Even a middling year by Jose Quintana, he's still probably going to be your best starter. On an offensive side, Brian Reynolds, I expect to probably be gone either within the next week of opening day or around the deadline. Brian Hayes will probably take over as the face of the franchise, and that tells you everything you need to know about where the Pirates are going to be headed. The other team that sold in the division before the season began is going to be the Cincinnati Reds. They end up in the 4 spot. They're probably going to still offload a couple of more pieces. They should be good in the first half and completely atrocious in the second half, because I expect them to make several moves to offload salary, and they're not going to be contenders this year. They very, very easily fall into that 4 spot for me. Third is a little bit more of a toss-up. You have the three teams left are going to be the Cardinals, Brewers, and Cubs. For me, this is where the Cubs fall in. Another rebuild, kind of a retool year for the Cubs. If they get some progression out of those young pieces that have struggled in the past couple of years, they could finish in that 2 spot. But for my money, they just don't have enough talent in that offense yet. And they could if they sell off another couple of pieces in a couple of years to have enough talent to compete for the division crown again. But right now, this is a retooling year. They finished firmly in that third position. Last two teams in the division are going to be the St. Louis Cardinals and the Milwaukee Brewers. The Cardinals, for my money, are very, very consistent, but there's not enough there to be able to justify giving them the crown. Could they get there? Possibly. Nolan Arenado really takes off. Yadi Molina has a little bit of a bounce back year. Wainwright looks like an ace again. The other pieces in the rotation take a step forward. That lineup continues to bang out base hits, that kind of thing. And the biggest thing for them is going to be Harrison Bader taking that next step in center field, becoming more of an offensive force and not an offensive liability. Maybe some consistency there will breed this lineup to be a little bit better. But everything is in the Milwaukee Brewers' favor. The starting staff is very, very good. I expect that to kind of carry the. It's not going to take 100 wins to win this division. We're probably talking 85 to 92 wins probably wins this division. The Pirates win probably 50, 60 games. The Reds 60, 65. Cubs 70 to 75. The Cardinals probably finish around that 80-win plateau, 85-win plateau. And then, of course, the Milwaukee Brewers finish probably 87 to 92, 93. But this for the Brewers, again, it's all about Yelich. If they get Yelich to kind of have a bounce-back year, we'll see what happens with him. Now, the one thing I haven't addressed yet is going to be essentially what the Brewers could really do to kind of move their needle forward aside from Yelich. Willie Adames was a nice piece for them, but there's a lot of attention that's being paid to that outfield and that starting staff. That starting staff is an injury away from being lacking, for a lack of a better term. Their outfield, they have 4 decent defenders in the outfield. Hunter Renfroe is going to have to take a step forward with his bat, become a little bit less of a swing and miss hitter in order for that lineup to be a little bit better. But they could add a nice piece, possibly trading away Josh Hader. Now, teams have talked for years about going after Josh Hader, namely the New York Yankees. Now, the Yankees were not willing to spend this offseason to go after a guy like Carlos Correa, and I believe that's because they want to lock up their own guys like Aaron Judge. But Josh Hader is under contract for, I believe, a year, maybe 2. I can't remember off the top of my head. But he's rounding about the time where the Brewers are going to have to trade in their assets in order to kind of keep this wheel going for the Brewers. And I expect Josh Hader to be moved and Devin Williams to probably take over that closer role around the trade deadline. What kind of pieces could you get back? Impact. We're talking 2 big prospects and probably a couple other younger prospects as well to kind of round out the package. Maybe even get a bullpen arm back for Josh Hader as well in the deal. In which case, the Yankees would do very well at getting Josh Hader, multi-inning reliever, slots in front of Aroldis Chapman and Zach Britton in that bullpen. That bullpen would be dynamic. Remember all those a couple of years ago, they had 3 different closers in the back end of their bullpen: Robertson, Britton, Chapman. I'm sure I'm missing one other. They also had Betances back there. If they can have that kind of lethal bullpen again with the pieces they brought in, maybe they don't need to go after a Carlos Correa. Maybe they can work this thing another way. Maybe they're still going to need a starter. But if they go after the next best thing in a Josh Hader, that would be great for them. But for the Brewers, this would mean more to them. They get younger, they get to reset their clock, and they still get to remain in contention if they get a bullpen arm back in the deal. Devin Williams, if he regains his form that he had in his rookie year, should provide adequate support in order for them to say, hey, maybe it's time to finally move Josh Hader. So let us know in the comment section what you think of where these teams are going to finish. Let us know if you think of your own Josh Hader trade. If you're a Dodgers fan, maybe you want him to kind of take over in that bullpen for you after losing Kenley Jansen and bringing in Craig Kimbrell. Maybe Kimbrell doesn't have a great year this year, but maybe a Josh Hader addition would be everything to the Dodgers. If you're a Braves fan, you brought in Kenley Jansen. Maybe Matt Olson does bring in the abilities that you're hoping that he would, replacing Freddie Freeman, and you just need a great bullpen arm to kind of finish things off. Josh Hader could be that guy. If you're a Chicago White Sox fan, you just traded away Craig Kimbrell in order for that your 8th inning guy. They do have a very lethal bullpen. Maybe they just need that multi-inning reliever to kind of finish off that bullpen and give them the pieces that they need to win a title. That's very likely or very possible as well. Maybe you're a Houston Astros fan and you've seen a lot of pieces go out the door, and maybe you just need to see that number or that bullpen piece to come in and kind of lock down things in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. Ryan Presley, they just signed to the extension. Maybe if they see Josh Hader around the deadline and say, hey, this should really round out the bullpen and make us a contender again for the World Series. Let us know in the comment section what you think. But again, just to recap, we have the Pirates in 5th, Reds in 4, Cubs in 3, Cardinals in 2, and the Brewers taking the crown. Let us know in the comments section what you think, and thanks for joining us. Stay tuned. In about around 9 o'clock, we'll start our next video going over the NL West. So don't forget to drop a comment. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button. It really does mean a lot to us. Thank you again for joining us here at the Upside Sports Network.